Dear students, welcome to this presentation of Unit 12. This is the first part of the unit, Rise of the Habsburg Empire. It received this title because, continuing with the previous unit, the Spanish monarchs obtained the title of Emperor. This is because of Carlos I, Charles I, who became an emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Here we can see the coat of arms of the emperor, showing the castles and the lions, and this two-headed eagle, which is the symbol of the emperors. Here we can see two of the most important Habsburg monarchs. They are called the Habsburgs because it's their family name. The most important one is Carlos I, Charles I, and then his son Philip II. They continue with the dynasty of the Catholic monarchs, but they changed their surname. The Catholic monarchs, as you know, belong to the dynasty of the Trastámara, but they are Habsburg. This is because of Carlos I. After the death of Isabel la Católica, the crown of Castile passed upon her daughter, Juana I. Juana I of Castile, also known as Juana the Mad. She was considered unable to govern, as they said she was crazy. It's not exactly sure if she was really crazy or it was just some deep depression. She was obsessed with her husband, Philip the Handsome, that passed away. And anyway, she been locked in a tower in Tordesillas. So she couldn't govern their kingdoms. So the crown passed upon her son, Charles I. Charles I was his son and son of the king. That was Philip I, Philip the Handsome, from the family of Habsburg. For that reason, we changed this family name. Here we can see Charles I. Charles I was a knight, a Christian knight. He saw himself as the great defender of the church. He went to war for defending the Christianity, and he acted as one of the medieval knights. It's considered to be the last medieval knight and the first modern king. He was king of Castilla, Aragon, Nápoles, Navarra, Granada, and he was also emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Here we can see the coat of arms of Carlos I. We can see the castles, the lions, the bars, and the chains, and the Granada, symbols of the Spanish kingdoms, but we can also see the cross of Jerusalem, symbols of Austria, Burgundy, Naples, Milan, and many other territories that belong to Charles I. Here we can see this two-headed eagle, symbol of the emperors. This is the toison, this necklace, symbol of nobility. This is the crown of the emperor. It's different from the crown of kings, which is more open. This one is closed. It's the maximum honor a monarch could obtain. Since the Middle Ages, to become an emperor, you need to be crowned by the Pope. The emperor was the Holy Roman Empire. It's over the rest of the kings and was the great ambition of many kings, and between them Carlos I. We can see this family tree of Carlos I of Spain. He was son of Juana of Castile and Philip the Handsome. Juana was the daughter of the Catholic monarchs, so Carlos inherited from their grandparents Aragon, Castilla, and also the territories in Italy that belong to Aragon, and the territories in America that belong to Castile. So all of them passed to Carlos I. But from his father and previously his grandparents on the father's side of the family, he received the territories in Central and North of Europe, what we call the United Provinces, the Netherlands, the Frank County, and finally, as his grandfather was the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, he inherited the title of emperor. This is the European inheritance of Charles I. We can call him Charles I or Charles V. It's pretty much the same because he was Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire, and he was Charles Carlos I of Spain, the Spanish monarchy. So he inherited this from the Catholic monarchs, this from his father. He became an emperor. It's very important because the Holy Roman Empire wasn't an hereditary title. The emperors were elected. They were electors, people that could choose the next emperor between members of the royal families. So as his grandfather was the last emperor, he could become the new emperor, but it wasn't automatically. He needed to be chosen. And here in yellow, we can see the territories that Carlos I obtained in a military campaign. Here we can see Charles II, sorry, Philip II, which is considered the greatest king of the uh, Spanish Empire. This is because Felipe II didn't inherit the title of Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. He inherited all of the territories from his father except for the empire, because Carlos I considered that it was too much of a kingdom to be in the hands of just one person. So he divided this and he gave the empire to his own brother, Fernando, and then he passed all of the territories remaining, Spain, Castilla, Aragon, Navarra, Granada, Italy, Flanders, America, to his son Felipe II. So Felipe II didn't have the problems of being the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, so he could focus on the Spanish monarchy and obtain uh, more progress in that aspect. He developed the Spanish monarchy at a great extent. Here we can see the coat of arms of Philip II that is more reduced than the one of his father. It has also the toison. It shows the arms of Castilla and Aragon and Leon, Aragon and Sicily, Austria, Burgundy, Flanders, and so on. And here, this is the coat of arms of Portugal, because Philip II became as well King of Portugal. So these were all of their territories. Becoming King of Portugal was very important because, as you know, the Castilian and the Portuguese has divided up the world. The Castilian took America, except for Brazil, that was Portuguese, and the Portuguese obtained the coast of Africa and Asia. So they were the owners of the oceans. When Philip II became the king of both territories, he was the undisputable ruler of the oceans. So talking about the Spanish Empire. In this time, we can still say Spain as a single country. There were still different territories, but as they were in the hands of just one single king, and they had been for several years, we can start talking about Spain. The word Spain started being used more and more. So even when they weren't unified territories, we can start using that, knowing that it's not exactly a country like nowadays. So, Carlos the First of Habsburg, grandson of the Catholic monarchs and son of Juana of Castilla and Philip the Handsome. He was the ruler of Burgundy in the north of France, Castilla, Aragon, Austria, and he was elected as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This is very important. It was an elective title. You didn't become it automatically. He was considered, or he considered himself as defender of Christianity. So he fought the enemies of the Pope, who are the Lutherans and the Turks, the Calvinists, the Anglicans, and so on. He went to fight with France for protecting their territories in Italy. And after he abdicated, well, before he abdicated, of course, he divided his territories upon Fernando, brother of Carlos, and Felipe, his son. Felipe obtained all of his territories except for the Holy Roman Empire that passed to Fernando, because he considered that it was too much of a land for just one person. Remember that this was very important because with all of these territories, America was included and the coast of Africa and Asia was included as well when Felipe II became king of Portugal. Why? Because because of the matrimonial policies, the marriage policies, the marriage alliance that took place from the time of the Catholic monarchs. As you know, the Catholic monarchs start marrying their sons and daughters with the kings and queens of the different dynasties, and the daughter of the Catholic monarchs was married to the King of Portugal. And after that, the great grandson of the Catholic monarchs, Felipe II, could inherit Portugal when the last king of Portugal died without heirs, because he was an legitimate heir. This is the beginning of what it's called the hegemony of the Habsburgs. Remember, these Habsburg are this family. Carlos I was a Habsburg, so of course his son was as well. Philip II didn't have the power upon the Holy Roman Empire, but it was on hands of his uncle, brother of Carlos, of course of the same family. So in the same family were the Holy Roman Empire, Castilla, Aragon, Austria, Burgundy, the Frank County, the Netherlands, Italy, America, coast of Africa, the coast of Asia, so a huge territory. For that reason, we said that they had the hegemony, which means the absolute power. They were the most important royal family in Europe and one of the most important in the world. He was the defender of Counter-Reformation. Remember, the Counter-Reformation was this movement of the Catholic Church against the acts of the Lutherans, the Anglicans, the Calvinists. He fought and he went to war against those people. And he also tried to develop a bureaucracy. The bureaucracy, the administration, is based upon documents, secretaries, and so on, and it was one of the great tasks of Philip II. Carlos created a huge empire, but Felipe tried to organize it. For that reason, he created secretaries, so some sort of ministers, councils, some sort of ministries. There were Council of Castilla, Council of Aragon, Council of Indias, so America, Council of Finances, Council of War, Council of State, some sort of uh, domestic affairs ministry, Council of the Inquisition, very important to control the fact, and so on. And uh, he created the viceroy. The viceroys were the second most important figure in the kingdom after the king. They were the substitutes of the king in the different territories. Viceroyalties were created in America, in Italy, and in Aragon. The most important ones were especially the ones in Italy and in America, as they were further away. He created audiencias, some mix between province and judicial court, and corregidores. The corregidores were political, uh, well, political figures that control the cities in the name of the king. They weren't created by Felipe II. They were created by the Catholic monarchs, but Felipe gave them more power to extend his control over the different parts of the land. So he developed bureaucracy and he established a professional army that was established with the Catholic monarchs, as we know, but it was developed in the shape of the tercios. These tercios were infantry soldiers that were professional. They received a salary, they received training, they were perfectly organized, and they could defeat the cavalry. That was the most important weapon at that time, the horse soldiers. Here we can see Charles I. Charles I was born in the year 1500. This is a very easy year to remember, and it allows us to calculate very easily the age that Carlos had in every year. Here, in 1516, he was 16 years old, and with his 16 years old, he became the heir of the monarchy of the Catholic monarchs. So he had a very powerful kingdom at a very young age, and he didn't have the maturity and develop enough to control all of these territories because he was also the grandson of the emperor and he wanted to become emperor as well. For that reason, he tried to obtain the favor of those people that were about to choose him as an emperor, the electors. So, after he was crowned as king of Castilla and Aragon, he left the country. He left them to go to the empire and try to obtain the title of emperor. For that reason, he needed to be chosen. And for that, he paid a great sum of money to those people that were about to choose him. Where does this money come from? From the taxes that the people in his kingdom pay, especially in Castilla and Aragon. So he was a foreign king. He didn't speak the language, he didn't speak Spanish. He didn't know nor understand the customs and the traditions of his kingdom. He went there, he put high taxes, he put as leaders of the kingdom to his own nobles who were as well foreigners, such as Adriano of Utrecht, that later became the Pope, by the way. He was the regent, so the one that ruled in the place of the king. He put his own nobles, foreign nobles, he put high taxes, he didn't stay in the country, and that didn't uh, was of the of the pleasure of the people in that land. So there was the revolt of the comuneros. The comuneros or comunidades were people that revolt, went to war, had a revolution against the king. They didn't want to expel the king or kill him or anything like that. They want the king to come back to Castilla. This was a revolt in Castilla, and they want to pay attention to the issues of that country. They ask him to expel the foreign ministers, to lower the taxes, and to rule as a proper king of Castilla, and to stop taking care uh, of the things that care him outside the country. This was some sort of civil war that led to different battles. This one was the Battle of Villalar, the last one in 1521, which was the decisive battle that the Comuneros lost. As they were lost, their leaders were executed. Here we can see the leaders of the Comuneros being killed and beheaded, and after that their heads were put on pikes as a symbol to the people. Here we can see the wife of one of these leaders, Maria de Pacheco, receiving the news of the death of his husband. Actually, Maria de Pacheco became a great military leader after that. He continued with the revolution, but finally she was defeated as well. But this wasn't the only revolt Carlos I needed to suffer, because as in the Kingdom of Castilla he suffered the revolt of the Comuneros, in the Kingdom of Aragon he suffered from the Germanías. The Germanías, that means the brotherhood from Germanats, brothers in Catalan, was a revolution in the Aragon kingdom. So Carlos I was a foreign king that put high taxes and put his own ministers and his own nobles, and that led to some revolution. The War of the Comunidades, the one of the Comuneros in Castilla. They were noble artisans and peasants in Castilla that wanted changes. He left as a regent of Adriano of Utrecht in German, this cardinal from Flanders, and the leaders were executed. So this revolution failed, but actually Carlos I learned a lot from this revolution. He knew that he couldn't dismiss his kingdom. He needed to pay attention to them. So they start focusing more and more and more in Castilla, and finally, when he retired, he moved to Castilla. At the end, he only spoke Spanish, or he mainly spoke Spanish. He adopted the Castilian customs, and he finally died there and is buried in here. In Aragon, they had the War of the Germanías, which is a similar revolt. In this case, it's the artisan and peasant against the nobles that abused their power in Valencia and Mallorca, that belong to the Aragonese kingdom. Remember when we talk about the judgment of Guadalupe, the Sentencia Arbitral de Guadalupe, we said that both the peasants fought against the nobles for the abuse of them. So this is some sort of continuation of that. And in that case, the king supported the nobles. Remember that in that time in Aragon there was a pactist monarchy, there was pactismo, so the king couldn't rule on his own. He needed to establish agreements with the different people, with the most powerful people in the land that were the nobles. If Carlos I had problems, his son Felipe II had problems as well. It wasn't because he was a foreigner, because he wasn't really. He was the son of the king. He was used to these Spanish customs. He spoke Spanish. He had the traditions. So he wasn't a foreigner. But there was inside religious problems. Officially, in Spain, there were no one that wasn't a Christian. But there were, for example, the Moriscos. As you know, these Moriscos were people, Muslim people or former Muslim people that were forced to convert to Christianism. Remember that with the Catholic monarchs in 1502, the Muslims were forced to be converted to the Christianity or to leave the country. The Moriscos were the people that convert. So officially, they were Christians, but they had their own customs, their own ways of dressing, their own ways of speaking. Most of them still spoke Arab. They had its own behavior and its own culture. Many of them still kept that Muslim religion. Anyhow, even when they became Christian or they behaved as they were Christian, the the kingdom didn't trust them. The Inquisition was against them. As you know, the Inquisition was against the people that was baptized. So the ones that had received baptism, the ones that had became Christians, as the Moriscos had become Christian, Inquisition could go against them. So they felt persecuted, and they were. So they revolt. This is called the revolt of the Alpujarras. The Alpujarras are mountains in Granada. They were mainly in Granada, of course, because that was the last Muslim kingdom in the Iberian Peninsula. So they have these revolutions in different places that mean that the army had to enter into that area and to suffocate that revolution. The Moriscos were forced to leave their areas, and many of them moved to Aragon and to other places. The other great problem was a plot that Philip II had to suffer. As you know, a plot is when some group of people try to obtain the power in a secretive manner, a conspiration. So, a conspiracy. So, uh, some nobles try to obtain the power. Here we can see Antonio Perez, the leader of this plot. He was one of the secretaries of Philip II. He was allied with the Princess of Eboli, and he tried to obtain the power. But he was discovered, and the king sent the soldiers against him. Then he knew he escaped, and he took refuge in Aragon. He was Aragonese, so he moved there and said that he was protected by the Aragonese laws. As you know, the different territories had their own laws. He said he was protected, and only the Justicia was the main judge in Aragon, was the one that could judge him. But the king didn't allow that, and he entered with his army in Aragon. It was shocking in that time because he was breaking the fueros, the laws of that territory. Here we can see the coat of arms of Aragon, and here we can see the soldiers of Philip II entering in Aragon, breaking the fueros, breaking the law. So Philip II had opposition as well. He persecuted the Jews. Remember, in this time they weren't exactly Jews, or we don't call them Jews exactly. They were converts. What's the difference? That they officially were Christians. Maybe they remain being Jews in secret, but officially, publicly, they need to be Christian because remember that in 1492 all of the Jews were forced to leave, and the Moriscos, that were people originally Muslim. This led to a concept, a very important one, that was the limpieza de sangre. This limpieza de sangre was a document that granted that you didn't have ancestors, Jews or Muslim. So you were Christian, your parents were Christian, and your grandparents were Christian as well. And if you didn't have one of these documents, you couldn't have a political power, you couldn't belong to the church, you couldn't participate in the administration, you were considered a second class citizen. So it was a very, very important document. Then, for all of this persecution, there was the revolt of the Alpujarras, this revolt of the Moriscos in Granada. And this was this plot of Antonio Perez that means that the king need to break these Aragonese fueros. As you know, fueros are laws, rights, and privilege of a territory given by the monarchs during the Middle Ages. It's important because, as you know, in the Middle Ages there were feudal monarchies. So the different feudal lords, the nobles, had a great amount of power in the different territories, and also the cities, the kingdoms, and so on had its own privilege. With the modern age, the kings tried to stop this feudal system and create an authoritarian monarchy. And to pass from this feudal system to the authoritarian one, a very important thing was stopping these fueros. It wasn't easy, the fueros did not disappear. Aragon continued having fueros up to the 18th century with the arrival of the Bourbon family. And for example, the north, the Basque country or Navarra, had fueros up to the 20th century. Actually, Navarra is called the Comunidad Foral de Navarra. Remember these medieval fueros. The Spanish Empire was a great empire with a great amount of power, and in order to reinforce that power, they need to go to war. This new army, the Tercios, fought in different territories. Here we can see the army marching through a city that is surrounded by this fortress in the shape of a star as a way to offer a greater fire range here from the people with musket or arquebus, and that can deflect the cannonballs. This is another example. The previous one was in Italy, and this is in Netherlands. The importance of this war was so much that the Spanish army even sacked Rome. This is the sack of Rome, saco, saqueo de Roma, where the Spanish troops entered into Rome and looted, took all of its treasure, because the wars in Italy were constant. This is a map of Italy in that time. As you can see, it's a chaos of different territories. In the south, in orange, we have the Aragonese territories, the ones that belong to the King of Spain. In pink, the territories that belong to France. This is France. These lines are because France and Aragon changed as rulers of Naples. So, at the south, we find the Spanish. At the north, the French. In the middle, different independent republic. For example, Venice, Genova, Firenze, Siena, and of course the Vatican States, the Papal States, the ones by the Pope. So if the Spanish went from the south and the French went from the north, there were lots of wars, especially for this part, Milan. The French wanted to conquer Milan, and the Spanish want to prevent it. And finally, as we have seen, Carlos I obtained the conquest of Milan. The other great focus of conflict was the empire. This is the Holy Roman Empire, most of we nowadays call Germany, which, as we have seen in previous unit, it was a mess of lots of different territories controlled by bishops, by cities, by nobles, dukes, archdukes, margraves, etc. Different nobles control different territories. But now, with the Protestant Reformation, many of these territories became Lutherans. The orange territories were Lutherans, while the green remained Catholic. And between them, there was a great civil war. In dark green, we have the Nuremberg League, which is the alliance of the Catholic army, and in dark orange, we find the Smalkalda League, the alliance of the Protestants. This war ended with the Peace of Augsburg. Important, we should not confuse Augsburg, which is the name of a city in Germany, with Habsburg, the name of the royal family of Carlos and Felipe. This is a peace that ended the hostilities and meant that religious tolerance was established. It is very important and is regarded as a good thing nowadays, but for that time it was a great failure, or at least the emperor, Carlos I, considered that a great failure. Why? Because he could not impose his power. Other great territory in which they fought was Flanders. Flanders is what we nowadays call the Netherlands and Belgium. Netherlands and Belgium at the north of Europe. It was a Spanish territory as it was inherited by Carlos I from his father. But in Flanders there were also Protestant, they were Calvinist. Remember, this was the doctrine of John Calvin. So they were Calvinist and they want to become independent from the Spanish power. The Spanish sent their armies, the tercios, and the powerful military leader Duke of Alba, the Grand Duke of Alba, uh, that was considered a terrible man. Actually, he created the blood tribunals, and it was saw as an incarnation of the devil by the people there. Here, it's a caricature of the Duke of Alba eating children as a monster. Nowadays, the the Dutch parents still say to their sons, instead of talking about the boogeyman or witches or something like this, they said, if you don't behave, the Duke of Alba will come after you. Here we can see the tercios. It was a war that the Spanish hated. It was terrible, bloody, the land was muddy, cold, a completely different culture, but still they fought for that. Here we can see the tercios in their regular formation with the pikes, the pikemen in the middle with these very long lances that could reach up to 5 or 6 meters long, and on the front the crossbows or arquebus or later musket that offer firepower. They shot and later they move and the pikemen could attack. Here we can see them. They were as powerful that they could stop the cavalry. Uh, but like this, they could stop the charge of the horse soldiers that during the Middle Ages with the knights were the most important military force. This is the end of the cavalry as the main military branch and the beginning of the importance of foot soldier infantry. Here we can see French cavalry from the time of Napoleon. Of course, cavalry did not stop, but it started losing more and more power. This is a map of Flanders, and this part in green are what are called the United Provinces. These United Provinces, which is the origin of what we nowadays call the Netherlands, was the Calvinist territory that fought against the Spanish and won. They obtained their independence from them. And the other great enemy were the English. The Englishmen had become Anglicans. They were members of the Church of England, so they did not follow the Pope. And Philip II, as the great defender of the Catholic faith, he sent a great navy trying to conquer England. This is called the Grande and Felicissima Armada. The British call it the Armada, but it's more famous as the Armada Invencible. This is a name that the English gave to it because it was extremely powerful, the greatest amount of ships that they have ever seen, but they were defeated. There was a great storm, and these were very big ships that were very, very difficult to move. And also, they were old-fashioned ships that were used for going against the other ships, disembarking the troops, and killing them like in land. So not using cannons as much or movement, but just going there and fighting hand by hand. In that in that fashion of fight, the Spanish were terrible. They were extremely powerful, but they weren't prepared for this great storm that sank many of the ships, and later the British that attacked them with smaller ships that would move faster, so they avoid the fight. Actually, later the British sent the counter armada to Spain, and it was defeated as well, so it was some kind of a draw. And finally, the greatest enemy were probably the Ottomans, the Turks. Here we can see the great Sultan of the Ottomans, Suleiman the Magnificent, that we have already talked about him. This is his surah, his signature, the fourth crown, and the great extent of the Ottoman Empire that, as you know, reached up as far as to Austria, conquering past the Danube and great part of Europe. So, as you know, the Spanish were here in this area, and the Holy Roman Empire was here. So, it wasn't a faraway enemy, exotic country. They were close, they were their neighbor, and they were Muslim. So, they were their great enemy. They had control over the Mediterranean, as we know how they stopped the routes to Asia and so on. And they tried to expand north. Actually, they besieged Vienna here. They surround it. They want to attack it early in the morning when nobody was awake. But there were some people that were awake then, who were the bakers. The bakers need to uh, wake up very early in order to prepare the bread. So they were awake. They could see the army, the Ottoman army approaching, and they gave the alarm between the city's watchmen. Then they went to arms, they fought, and they could save Vienna. For that reason, Vienna was not conquered. As a reward for this act, the the people from Vienna gave the bakers the right to carry a sword, which was a privilege only by the nobles. And as a way to remember this happening, the bakers create this kind of food in a shape of a half moon, a crescent moon, the symbol of the Ottoman, that the French called croissant. The Ottomans support the pirates in the Mediterranean Sea, the pirates from Barbary, for example, the pirate Barbarossa. And for that reason, the Christian joined in a holy league, a great society, a great military alliance, creating huge navies in order to fight the Turks. They went to Lepanto in Greece, they fought a great naval battle, and they won. And one of the most famous soldiers in that battle was, of course, Miguel de Cervantes, that was wounded in an arm in that battle. Here we can see a painting of the saints and angels looking upon the battle as a gift by God. Here the general Don Juan de Austria received it in heavens. This is the battle that Miguel de Cervantes called la más grande ocasión que en el mundo vieron los siglos. So the defense of the empire need to be defended, and for that reason they went to war several times. With the French, they went to war in Italy in order to conquer Milan. Milan was a very powerful city, a very rich one with important fortress. So it was very valuable for all of the countries. The French wanted to conquer Milan. The Spanish want to avoid it, so they went to war, and they actually did it. They succeed. They conquer Milan. So it was a war between France and Spain, but not in France nor Spain, but in Italy. In the German states, so in the Holy Roman Empire, the reason of the war, the casus belli, was Lutheranism. They were from a different religion. So they had this civil war that ended with the Peace of Augsburg. That ended the war, started the tolerance or religious tolerance, but was seen as a terrible defeat by the emperor, by Charles I, because he considered that he was unable to uh, eliminate the Lutherans. So right after that, he abdicated upon his son and his brother. These are the conflicts of Charles I, while these two are the ones of Philip. He fought against the Netherlands that were Calvinist, but they created the United Provinces and became independent, which was really a defeat for Philip II. They were also at war against the British, that were Anglican, that support the pirates in the ocean, trying to obtain the money from America, and they sent the armada that was sunk. The other great enemy, the Turks, the Ottomans, is the same. They had expanded through the Danube, the Mediterranean and the north of Africa, created a huge empire, and also, of course, they were Muslims, which for such a Christian king as well, Carlos I and later Felipe II, it was very important, of course. In order to stop them, they conquered Tunis in 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 Tunisia, the capital of Tunisia, as the Catholic monarchs had already conquered Argel, Oran, Muhia, and so on. They conquered this city. They created the Holy League with Venice, the Pope, and different cities and Christian territories, and they fought the Battle of Lepanto. That was a great victory against the Turks. Then they annexed Portugal because of this marriage alliance, this well, uh, hereditary relationships. So we need to know the definition of the Peace of Augsburg, this treaty signed in 1555 that ended the religious war in the Holy Roman Empire, allowed the expansion of Protestantism. It was one of the earliest examples of religious tolerance, and of course, caused the abdication of Carlos I, that left, as we have seen, his kingdoms to his son Philip II, and only the Holy Roman Empire and the territories in Austria to his own brother Fernando, that became the emperor. With this, we have finished this unit, and as an activity, we need to do a text commentary exactly the same like the previous ones, which are the Palamos instructions. This instruction that Carlos I gave to his son Philip II when he was a teenager. Philip II was 16 years old at that time. Then we need to do the test of Unit 12, the first part, so about this unit, and we will do the exam preparation of Unit 12. The deadline is the 20th of April, so please do it. If you have any question, any doubt, anything you want to ask me, do it. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have anything to say, please write me an email.